All right, welcome to Beyond the Basics. I'm National Master Spencer Finegold, and today we're going to look at, well, our theme is going to be centralization. When you're learning the basics, you learn that you should control the center, especially in the opening. Sometimes, you're playing the middle game and it's pretty complicated, and you kind of forget that fact. Maybe you miss some powerful centralization moves. So we're going to look at some examples of powerful centralization in open and closed positions. And we're also going to look at, if you have more space in the center, how to continue then. Because usually if you have more control of the center, that's good, but then what? All right, so first we'll take a look at a game about 4 years ago. It was played by yours truly. I had the white pieces, and this is the second round of the Michigan Open. I used to live in Michigan. So I'm not going to go through the opening too much. It was a Slav, sort of main line. My opponent plays a semi-Slav, and I play one of the two most common moves, E3, sort of known as the Moran variation, although after knight d7, queen c2, my opponent played bishop e7. It's a little bit more common to see black developing the bishop to d6. And why not? I mean, I can't pin his knight, so he doesn't need to go to e7 to break that pin. Also, I'm not fianchettoing my bishop here, which would make the bishop on d6 less powerful. I'm clearly going to get out my bishop more traditionally on d3 or e2. So bishop d6 is by far the most common move played by grandmasters. And anyways, bishop e7, it's a little bit more passive. And against both moves, I sort of decided I was going to play g4. This move is attributed to Shabalov, American grandmaster of Latvian descent. A lot of Latvian players like to play the move g4 in many different openings, not just the semi-Slav. They love playing g4. This is obviously kind of a weird-looking move, but I'm trying to attack the knight and gain some control of the center that way. My opponent plays one of the most common reactions, which is to take the pawn. It's free, more or less, after all. Also, you'll see grandmasters play d takes c4 to give the knight the d5 square as another way of playing. And there's other stuff you could do too, but those are the two most common ways to go. So he took, and well, when I was talking about what grandmasters do, usually the bishop's on d6, like I was mentioning, but rook g1, so I'm trying to win my pawn back. And like I said, don't have to worry too much about this part of the game, but you'll notice that my opponent, he moves his knight many times in order to trade it. So my opponent, he's been sort of moving his knight a lot, and neglected his queenside development a bit. So keeping in mind the theme of this lecture, what do you think a nice, strong move for white could be?
B4.
Which four?
B4.
B4? All right. I mean, I guess you want to attack on the queen side a bit, but I'm pretty sure this this lesson was about the center.
We just talked about the lack of queen side development.
Right.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah, usually you take advantage of your opponent's lack of development by attacking in the center. They cannot control the center as well as you. I'm not like white has a huge development advantage, obviously. I've been playing some esoteric moves myself. But I can strike in the center here with a pretty powerful move.
You don't play e4.
E4, right, E4. This helps my bishop on c1 get developed, and gives me a huge space advantage in the center. My opponent even took my c-pawn, probably not the best way to react. I could recapture, but I was a little younger then, a little more impetuous, so I was like, I don't want to take that pawn. I'm just developing. I'm all about the center this game. Although probably taking the pawn's good. My opponent, he was super greedy. It's like, I'm keeping that pawn. Yeah, I mean, I understand, you win material, that's pretty good, but here, white has an overwhelming presence in the center. What would be another powerful central move here? And very often when you're more centralized than your opponent, or if you have better control of the center even with pawns, that'll lead to a big attack. Well, here my opponent really can't castle kingside, so we could still attack him in the center. We just got to break open that center. How do you do it? D5. Exclam. D5, exactly. Now my opponent's in kind of a pickle. He doesn't really have a good way of dealing with the tension here in the center. Well, he did something that's very typical. You take once and then push past. This sort of keeps the center closed, more or less. But now, an extremely powerful centralization was found by myself. We think they could solve it. Really strong move here.
I'll try again, knight e4.
Knight e4 is pretty good. You're putting a piece in the center. I like that. Probably he'd bring his bishop back to e7, right? Or even, yeah, e7 would be good. So that's sort of, I want you to play d6 attacking my bishop so you can't play knight d6. And then I'll just bring my bishop back to d8. But it's a pretty good move. You have a little stronger, though. In fact, significantly stronger. You'll notice my opponent has some loose pieces. That, oh, why is that yellow? Give me red. Come on. There we go. And that one. These pieces are kind of loose, so I can touch them both. Just say hello. You know, nothing too serious, just, you know, a little friendly visit.
Queen e4?
Yeah, queen e4. Queen e4 is super powerful. It really develops the initiative for white. I'm attacking the bishop. I'm looking at this guy in case I play d6. Well, you know I'm probably going to play d6. And if I play d6, the reason I didn't play knight e4 is I wanted knight d5. d6, knight d5. Really controlling the center very well. And when you control the center, I mean, you tell children, you're like, oh, the knight in the center, it can move to 8 squares. On the side of the board, it can only move to 4 squares. And in the corner, only 2. But really, it's important to play in the center because you can go to all parts of the board more quickly, more freely. Here, the queen in the center of the board, it's eyeing the king, hitting the bishop with the tempo, and even on the queen's rook as well. This queen controls a lot of sectors of the board. And it's a very powerful move, queen e4. I was happy I found it, especially because I wasn't too strong back in this day. But my opponent, he saw his bishop was attacked. d6. He saw his rook was attacked. And knight d5. And he brought his queen all the way back. Yeah, white has a completely dominating position here. I went on to win, not too precisely, but you could see that white really is dominating the center of the board here, and black is on his back foot. I actually played an unusual move, bishop h6, but knight c7 checked. The most obvious move was probably even stronger. But anyways, sort of outside the scope of this lesson, I just wanted to show these powerful centralization moves. Queen e4 and knight d5, but even before that, breaking open the center with moves like e4 and d5. This is how you punish your opponent for grabbing pawns, moving their knight like 5 times, and not castling. Okay, the opening was very complicated, and it's not like that was the only thing he had to worry about, or myself. But yeah, a lot of times this happens. You get too caught up on other things, and you forget to get developed quickly enough. All right, let's look at what's next. No, doesn't need to say that. All right, so a classic game from 1938, an Alekhine game. This is not Alekhine's most famous game, probably his game against Reddy and Bugulyabov are his 2 most famous games, but this time he's playing a fellow, his name is Buk. Both of his O's should have umlauts over them, but I didn't know how to do that. So anyways, we get a Queen's Gambit accepted, another more or less classical opening. And yeah, all this has been played many times before. c5, castles. Now, here, Buk, he wasn't booked up too well, although his name would suggest otherwise. He played knight c6. It's not a bad move. It looks pretty good. And it's 1938, so probably not a lot of games in this position at that point. But nowadays, most grandmasters will play the move a6. It's much more common than knight c6. It's a little more flexible, too, to get a quick b5, bishop b7 going. But yeah, like I said, knight c6, not a big problem. Not a horrible move, really. And queen e2, this is a way that white could handle if black did play a6 and b5 early. In fact, he does go for a6 and b5. So here, well, black already made a lot of pawn moves and didn't develop all his pieces yet, or castle. But he makes yet another pawn move. Probably his position's not bad if he develops one of his bishops. Probably what I would do. Maybe he didn't want to play bishop e7 because he thought white would take on c5 then, and after recaptures he'd be a tempo slower. Yeah, okay, but it's sort of better than what happened in the game. b4. But white has a powerful reply here. Well, your knight's attacked. How do you think you would handle this position with white? d5. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty similar to that other game. Counterattacking the knight as well, but this is pretty difficult for black to handle. Well, in fact, he played knight a5, attacking the bishop, which provoked, I think, bishop a4 check, yeah. And here. All right, what would white do now? I think pretty obvious move white can play here. Although some things attacked already. Pretty tense position. Knight e5, that's pretty sharp. But what if I take your c3 knight? I mean, I have my bishop defended appropriately.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's probably bad. It's too aggressive.
Yeah, a little bit. I do like centralizing, though. Yeah, take on e6. It's the correct tactical move, of course. You know, he has to. If he takes the bishop, you throw in e takes f7, Zwischenzug, and get an extra pawn. So he's got to take and ruin his structure. All right, but now how do you continue? Yeah, that's what he did. He did rook d1. Now, it's important not to chicken out here and say, oh, I have a slightly better pawn structure. I'll just play this position. Yeah, probably white's a little bit better here, but I mean, don't you deserve more? I would want more. Rook d1. Well, this gives up a piece, so he took it. So what was AAA's idea? Alexander Alexandrovich Alekhine. You know you don't want to mess with a guy like that. Alexander Alexandrovich. I mean, you wanted to play rook d1 and not calculate, but right, I think he took on d7 first, and then knight e5, right. Rook a7, I believe. I'm pretty good at remembering this game. It's like I prepared it. And here, Alekhine just recaptures the pawn. And he's playing this position essentially down a rook. I mean, he's kind of down a piece, right? Because he can always take on d7 and win the exchange. But he's so well coordinated, and black is quite the opposite. His control and his well-centralized knight is really putting black under a lot of pressure. And I don't think black's losing here. I don't even think black's really objectively worse, mostly because I analyzed this with the chess engine and said it was equal. But during a tournament game, it'd be very difficult to play this with black. And already black makes a blunder. King e7. Well, he was afraid of queen h5 check.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty tough check.
Yeah, king e7, it seems, like, how could that be right? Right? It seems like that. But if he plays a normal developing move, maybe he should have done this. Check and takes, and just go back. Computer says equal. I'm pretty sure anything could happen here. You know, it's not really practical to say this is equal. Anything's possible. So even like that is pretty good. I wouldn't really want to play g6. It seems like a weakening move. And I have a response to g6, but I won't tell you yet because of how the game went. I don't want to ruin it. But all right, so king e7, not the right defense. And, well, Alekhine, he's pretty sharp tactically. He noticed, hey, this is a relationship I'd like to exploit. But how? How could white do that? Yeah, e4. The idea of bishop g5. Well, sure, he could play knight f6, which he did immediately. And then here. But yeah, he's all pinned up. White's control of the center is, yeah, it's overwhelming already. And yeah, he can't get his king side developed. White has a tremendous compensation here for a whole rook. It's actually winning. It's not just compensation, no. It's winning. He plays, well, he wants to get out his dark square bishop, right? I mean, I'd want to do that, I think. Oh, well, he attacks the knight first. Oh, here, yeah, here there's a shocking move, queen h5, trying to get in there. This is actually even stronger than what was played. I think maybe he didn't like queen takes e5, but it's still queen e8 check time. Yeah, queen e8 check, king d6. If all this analysis is wrong, I'm going to be embarrassed. Check. King c7. Probably. Maybe here? This looks like it's about checkmate time. Maybe you could even take the knight and mate on d7. But anyways, I wouldn't play queen h5. That's crazy, for the record. Bishop f4 is completely winning and obvious. So that's why he did it. Yeah, usually you don't want to play the most complicated way, even if the computer says it's the best. You know, you just want to, if you have a simple win, just go for it. Bishop f4 just is really powerful. He has to move his queen again. But now what's the best idea? Pretty simple idea here. Yeah, rook d1. Just get your last piece into the attack. You don't have to play any fancy move yet. Like g4, g5 would be a pretty fun idea, I think. But yeah, get your last piece into the attack. And it's still asking black, like, how do you even move? He can't move his king because of the rules. There's no legal king move. And so he can't really develop his king side very easily, which is why he played the move g6, fatally weakening the dark square. So who can find the way to win material by force? You know, even though this lecture is mostly on strategy, you can't have strategy without tactics. So what's the winning? It's not really a combination, it's more like sequence. But g6, it fatally weakened the dark squares. And we could punish our opponent on the dark squares. If only he had a couple more moves to get his king side developed, it'd be a pretty easy win for black, maybe.
Bishop g5, and then the knight cannot move anymore.
What if here? This is correct, though. Yeah.
And then we can attack the d7 square.
We want to play knight d7? Is that what you're trying to do? I mean, if I had white, I would try to probably win this knight. Knight d7 is crushing. e5 is coming. And knight d7 prevents rook f8 as well. And so there's nothing to be done now. Black's going to lose a ton of material. Even though he's up a rook, he's going to lose a lot more. Well, he did this. Ran away. Probably there are a lot of winning moves here. You don't have to worry about back rank issues, because you have rook d1, bishop d1 even, if you want to keep your rook there. So he took it and played e5. I think it's resign time at this point. Yeah. He looked at his watch. It was shaped like a book, and he resigned. Queen f3 is coming next, and black just never got out of the center. Powerful centralization at many points forced book to, well, keep his pieces on the side of the board. A few key moments Well, early, b4 is wrong because of the powerful strike d5. And also, it's obviously important to throw this in, and then a very nice move, rook d1, as suggested by the audience. And this is probably not completely winning for white, but yeah, it made black, it caused a lot of problems for black, and he faltered here with king e7. A move that, of course, looks wrong, but it was just too difficult for him to find the correct idea. Also, even, I forgot to mention this, but even queen b8's a fine move here. Takes, takes, still e4 like in the game. This is just an unclear position, still extra material for black, but a lot of problems to solve. But all right, let's go on with it to the next game. What? That's the previous game. All right. So here's a modern game where centralization, well, one side plays the opening in such a way that he allows his opponent to get a huge center. And Vitiugov with white makes him regret that decision, perhaps. So white's playing in this way to avoid the Grunfeld defense. Of course, white is going to have to be happy with playing against a King's Indian. And now he plays a Saemisch variation with f3. And black is playing with knight c6 and a6. This is a common way to play against the Saemisch with black. Also, black plays this way against g3 variations of the King's Indian. And rook b8. A common idea here is to play b5, kind of the point of black's play. And so white is taking some measures against that. You'll notice that white is delaying developing his kingside and castling, because the center's pretty closed, or at least it would become closed. It could become closed after, say, e5, d5. When the center's closed, you can take a little bit more time to maneuver around and maybe even keep your king in the center a bit. Although you have to be careful if it opens up, like in the last two games we saw. So e6, this looks like kind of a passive move. This position's been played before. I gotta say, I don't understand this opening a lot from black's perspective. Probably a King's Indian player would tell me that it's good or something, but looks like I'd rather have white. And yeah, he goes g3 to play bishop g2. I remember there was a game recently that Wang Hao had with black in a similar position, but like I said, I don't really think, this is the safest way to play with black, let's say. So he plays b5. I mean, you typically don't want to let your opponent lord his space advantage over you without putting at least some pressure on it. He could also have tried to play the move c5, maybe preparing it first with b6 so he doesn't lose a pawn. But b5 is probably all right, and c5. c5 is not the only move. It makes sense, though. You want to keep the rook on b8 a little bit more passive and expand in the center with c5. And he plays b4. This is a good move, actually. It prevents the knights from going to c3, among other things, and knight f2. Now, black finds a nice way to develop his queenside. How should black continue?
Maybe a5?
Yeah, a5. Absolutely. Followed by bishop a6. Yeah, this is one other good reason to play b4 like black did. It opens up this diagonal. And the bishop on a6 will be pretty good. And black's position is not too bad here. You wouldn't expect 2650 GM Ganguly to play too poorly with black. Although personally I wouldn't play this opening, but that's just me. This is a good way to try to play for a win with black, which is not too easy to do if your opponent's 2700. Knight d7 and f4. So white is really getting a huge space advantage going. And soon the center locks up with d5 and e5. Well, I'm sure when Vitiugov played f4, he was like, well, at any point, Ganguly can play d5 and basically force e5. But white has a huge space advantage here. And a lot of times that translates into an attack on the king, and we're going to see this in not only this game, but also the next game we're going to look at. When the center is closed, a lot of maneuvering happens, but if you have more space, it's a little bit easier for you. And if you have more space in the center, often you can go to your opponent's king with your pieces more easily than they can go defend with their pieces. And that's pretty much exactly what happens. So knight f5, really important square for black here. And they prepare it with king h1. Rook a8. This move I didn't understand. The computer says it's best. Yeah, I don't understand it. I mean, I guess he's trying to attack on the queen side at some point. But, okay. I mean, they're moving around. Finally, he's like, take my bishop, please. And f5. Well, black was worried white would play f5, right? But if knight c6, f5, how do you think you would handle this with black? Black actually has a good way, a very easy way to handle this break without getting a bad position at all. So black to play, how do you defend against f5? f5's actually dubious, as my annotation put there. Yeah, it's not easy. I would be thinking this is very good for white. I'd be confident with white and nervous with black. Yeah, it's important in a closed position to really assess these pawn breaks correctly. If you're afraid of a pawn break that doesn't work, you're going to probably play a bad move based on that judgment. That's exactly what happened here with Ganguly. I mean, I don't know. You know, he's pretty strong, so I can't pretend like I can follow his train of thought all the time. But black does have a good defense. Anybody want to give him one last shot? Bueller? Right. But I think probably f6 is, I mean, that variation is even better than what Ganguly did. But yeah, black should take once and play bishop c8. This basically forces white to do something here, and he doesn't have anything particularly powerful. For example, f6, bishop f8. Oh, no, you can just take it. All right, what am I talking about? But even bishop f8, you can't even break in this type of position. But you don't usually want to allow bishop f8. Or, I mean, you don't want to allow f6 and have to play bishop f8. But this is just a non-starter. You could just take it. Even with, yeah, just take it. But OK, he could take this, right? What's the problem here? This looks like one side has two bishops. And it's not white. Well, maybe bishop h3, though. Yeah, I don't think this is bad for black. His king is relatively safe and not losing material. Comfortable, I mean, relatively comfortable. So f5 was not killer. f5 was not a killer break. But yeah, like I said, when you have this closed type of position, you really have to judge those pawn breaks accurately. If you think your opponent's pawn break is stronger than it is, you're giving him a better position than he deserves, especially after f5. He could even have taken en passant, which would have been similar to f6 and ef, and played positionally. But I think he had the idea to swing over to the king. Centralized pieces can move more freely. I mean, it's going to be difficult for all of black's pieces to defend the king. But white's ready to bring his knights in, bring his rook on the g-file, and see what's going on. You know, just go to the king's place, see how it's hanging over there. So knight c6, he's like, well, I should get my knight over to defend. And bishop f3. This is actually a mistake. I mean, it's only move 25. Oh, did you have a question? Or?
No, I was just taking knight f3.
Yeah, knight f3.
Yeah.
Knight f3. Get in there on g5, rook g1. Now, even though this is only move 25, I wouldn't be too surprised if they were in some time pressure. I noticed in closed positions, even though when you look at the game after, the computer says that all the moves are equal to each other, so it doesn't really matter. But you really think like, oh, these are all these ideas, and I have to be careful about them. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to play without ideas for a human. And so we eat up a lot of time in closed positions. So even at move 25, they could have been pretty low on time in my experience, at least. But yeah, knight f3 is pretty strong. If bishop e2, you could play rook g1, but rook d2 is strong, preparing in the future to double your rooks on the g-file. And white has a big attack here. I don't know if it's decisive. You know, I'm not going to say white's going to win by force with perfect play here, but very comfortable to play white. One thing to note is opposite color bishops really favors the attacker. And this is true if he has to play king h8 and you get your bishop to g6. It's difficult for white or for black to defend on the light squares. So knight f3 would have been good. Bishop f3, it's just not quite as good right now. But still, white has a very strong position. I mean, he's got a huge space advantage in the center, and he's ready to build up slowly the attack, where it's more difficult for black to get over and defend, although he's doing a pretty good job. And here I think he makes kind of a wrong decision with knight d8. His idea here is he wants to play with his rooks on the second rank, on his second rank, by playing c6 and rook a7, and defending with his rooks along the second rank. But Vitiugov breaks through that. Yeah, of course, with hindsight, it's easy to say that's a mistake. Could have played king h8, similar to king h1, like white played. I like getting my king off the open g file. And with bishop h6. And yeah, I mean, probably white wants to move his white square bishop now and play knight f3 and then knight to g5. But black can play rook g7 and he's got some control of the g file. Notice if rook g7, you can't take my bishop because rook takes g1, check wins the queen. You know, rook g7, queen takes h6. So you don't have to worry too much about that. Although still white has all the space and he's holding the cards pretty much. But after knight d8, he gets his knight over to g5 really quickly. And gets in here with check as well. Already black's king is uncomfortable. All of white's pieces all of a sudden are on the king side. You know, even when this comes over here. And black, he still has got to get some guys over there. Well, king h8, defended his bishop. Finally he doubled, I was waiting for that. And takes. And he takes this, ending the game. Actually, knight f7 wins here. Knight f7 check, rook takes g6 wins. Not moving wins because you're threatening all these things. But yeah, he just can't play, he can't defend with these pieces. He didn't have enough space to get them over to the king side. Well, like I said, he probably wasn't lost the whole game. Both sides made some inaccuracies that we more or less glossed over because, I mean, this is beyond the basics, not way beyond the basics, like a little bit beyond. But yeah, you could see just having a big space advantage, it's easy to move all your pieces over to your opponent's king. It's a little bit more difficult for them. So let's see one of my own examples. Yeah, how about that? The only time we have black's perspective. The game I just played, hot off the presses, you know, in last month, just a week or two ago. So my opponent, he plays in English, and yeah, I played the most aggressive way, f5, because my opponent's pretty low rated compared to me, like 500 points low rated or so. So I really want to win. This looks like a Sicilian Grand Prix attack, but with reverse colors. And he plays e3. Now, e3 is maybe the most common move. Actually, I used to play this a lot with white. I'd always play e3 in this position. Thing is, if d3, then I can pin your knight. Not that that's a big deal, but you know, that's a thing that black can do. Or if knight f3, I'll play bishop c5, and you won't play e3 probably, because your knight's on f3 and can't go to e2. So that's kind of why people will play the move e3. They want to play knight e2, and you can't pin my knight. I can play knight d5 now. Haha. Yeah, and I used to think that way with white. And I think e3 is a good move. e3, it doesn't develop a piece or help develop a piece even. So it allows black to play a little bit ambitiously with the pawn sacrifice d5. Something that I faced with white, and I never really liked facing it with white, so I thought, oh, I might as well do it with black then. Takes, and knight b4. I'm just trying to win the pawn back. I'm also looking at that d3 square, wondering what that's about. Looks like check to me. So most people play d3 here, including myself. But my opponent played d4, a move that I didn't know. And so I went into a deep think. Yeah, I could take on d4, where he can't take with the queen because I fork him on c2. But if he just takes with the pawn, that position is not too good for me. You know, sure, I can win back my pawn and play this position, but don't you wish my pawn is back here? That'd be way better. So yeah, I don't need to open the position up. This is the last thing I need to do with the pawn, with my pawn on f5. So e4, exclam. My opponent played quickly here, bishop f1, as if he had already had the position, but then why would you play d4? It's not a good move. I don't know. And bishop f1 is like the best move. If he plays knight h3, I wouldn't just recapture the pawn. Seems like a good idea. But after castles, he's going to play f3. I'm far behind in development all of a sudden. Not really sure how that happened. But next thing you know, you're behind in development. f3's coming, and you wish you had more pieces out. Probably white's already better. But of course, if he doesn't play bishop f1, I might as well give him the check like it's payday. King f1. And just play this position down a pawn, but with pretty good compensation. My knight is great. His king is not great. And I played bishop d6 so I can answer knight f4 by just taking it with my bishop. So I can keep my great knight on d3. But yeah, probably it's not like losing for white, although computer likes black. Usually when you're down a pawn, computer doesn't like you. So. But instead he played bishop f1, probably the best move. I took, and he controlled this important d5 square. So my knight on d5 is very well centralized. It can't get kicked away by the c pawn because he traded that away. He can't get kicked away by the e pawn because I played e4. This is just like in a French defense. You see this type of situation happen a lot with reverse colors again. Now just like that other position, probably white's not worse here. It's just really nice to play with black. You can, yeah, he stopped b5. Didn't really think that was a huge priority. But you can sort of rest easy knowing you have good control of the center. I mean, worst thing that happens, your opponent defends and you can't win. But, you know, well, okay, worst thing happens, you blunder and lose, right? But we're assuming, you know, we're playing kind of normal. My opponent plays b3. Well, he's defending his bishop, but what's his secondary purpose? Why did he play b3 other than to protect his c4 bishop? Yeah, bishop a3. So what do you think black should do about that? Can't really stop it, but we can sort of impede it, at least a little bit. This is also a common idea in the French defense because very often black wants to trade off his queen's bishop. And here, my opponent with white, who has the French structure, wants to trade off his queen's bishop. No surprise there. And very often you could play with check. Yeah, and now just go back. Although bishop d6 would have been better. The point of bishop d6 is just immediately take the knight on f4 once it goes there. Which I was reluctant to do. I wanted to like fool around a little, you know, see what's going on first. Well, here my opponent's threatening to take my bishop with his bishop and knight e6 check because I can't play queen takes. So queen d7, h4, stopping g5, and rook d8. Yeah, this position, it looks very similar to that previous game with reverse colors. h5. So my opponent might be gearing up for knight g6. Not really right now, though. I could take it and play knight g4 to stop his queen from coming in. So don't have to worry about it right at the second, but definitely something I had to keep my eye on. So yeah, you can see I'm really well centralized. I got pretty much all my pieces right in the center of the board. But the center's closed and not really easy to make a pawn break, is there? I mean, it's like, what do you do if you can't make a pawn break? Pawn breaks are usually the, I mean, that's usually how you plan. You know, that's the next phase of the game you're going to break, and then we'll get to that phase, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully it helped you. But I can't really make a pawn break right now. I have to arrange, I guess, g5, but that'll take quite a long time, won't it? So we just fooled around a bit more. a6, a5. Now you could say he fixed my pawns. You could also say he put another pawn on a dark square for his bishop to not like, so I don't know. Finally, I did this idea. Queen f7. Yeah, rook b1, rook c1. rook c8. The reason I played rook c8 is because I wanted to play knight g4. And now if he takes on d5 and I recapture with the pawn, I'm already challenging the c-file. Again, I was mentioning this last time. When you're playing in a close position, a lot of times you think that this stuff matters. Of course, it doesn't. Computer's like, every move is just equal. It doesn't matter. So that's why I'm more or less skipping over this part. Finally, I took the knight. And here. Now, I wanted to play rook e6. But the astute audience member will notice rook e6 has a tactical flaw. What would be wrong if I played rook e6? Right. Yeah, so the c pawn would be pinned. Bishop takes d5, wins a rook, actually, or more. So I have to move my rook back. Yeah. There. Oh, so he finally got his bishop working, right? This is the downside of me playing bishop takes knight on f4. But still, his bishop is not too close to his king. I have a big space advantage, and so I'm sort of trying to go over to the king now, just like in that last game. I didn't know that last game while I was playing this game, but it seems like a pretty obvious idea. Again, I have to play g5. It's the only pawn break I have. I have to arrange it at least. Don't really want to play it right now, I guess. But well, now I can play rook e6 like was my plan. Rook h4. Oh, he's preparing to defend this, which he did. Now I played queen f6. This move has, my point is I want to play g5 still. But I'm preventing him from taking en passant because his rook would be hanging on h4. So that's why he played a somewhat shocking move. And it reminds me of the Alekhine book game. Not that you guys remember, but king g3. He moves his king up again. Probably not correct. I mean, just like Book did. It makes sense, though. He's protecting his rook on h4. So if g5, he can take en passant. And his rook isn't hanging on h4. He could have played a more normal move. It's like bishop c5. It doesn't really do anything, but just like all of our other moves, sort of. And yeah, I could still play with g5 or arrange it more. But now, OK, still he can't take on g6 en passant because his rook would be hanging. But he can just play this position. It's not bad. I mean, what's the problem? I have no threat, really. Sure, I could play king h8 and rook g8 and get some play going. But I still have a lot of work to do if I'm trying to win this game with black. Instead of bishop c5, he plays king g3, right? And I still play king h8. This is just like that other game. Wow. It's like I prepared a good lecture. Unbelievable. Sort of by accident, but no, I knew they were similar. And he takes again. Yeah, I don't know why he relieved tension here finally. I mean, he could have taken this bishop 100 times. And I'm not going to take his bishop on c4. I mean, when he played queen c4. That's crazy. I mean, don't you think your king is going to be a little vulnerable? This is just begging for g5. I obliged him. And yeah, now it's actually completely winning. He took en passant. Even taking with the rook is good. Hanging h7 with check. Yeah, that's just completely winning. But queen takes is also good. Took the rook. Knight takes discovered, check. King h3. All right, so who could find a good plan of attack? I'll tell you right now, black is completely winning. I mean, white's king is just too out of control over there. Just completely out of control. And his pieces on the queen side, yeah, this is a symptom of having less space in the center. Your pieces have a difficult time going over to the other side of the board. Although he purposefully played queen c4. So. Right. No, I mean, I was sitting here. At this point, I had like 15 minutes. My opponent had 1 minute. And I was sitting here. I couldn't find a way to beat my opponent by force. It looks so good, but you cannot mate. He can defend with queen f1 in a lot of variations. I played rook d8. That's a winning move. But he can defend. I mean, bishop e7. He's actually losing here. So how do you finish him off? Here I blundered because I thought for like 11 minutes on my previous move. I had not a lot of time. Right, I did check on h5, and that actually doesn't win. Well, let's say we continue. He'll block it up. We can just play knight f7, and that's pretty much it. He can't do anything after this. You know, rook g1, queen h5 check, followed by knight takes g5. We'll end the game. Just straight up end the game. So this would have been the ticket home. Pretty much the last thing I'd have to find. But instead wrong, queen h5 check. Check. I mean, I did all this good looking stuff. But now what? Okay, knight g4 you might think, right? I didn't do this. I was afraid of rook takes h7. It actually doesn't work, because that's why I put double question mark. Takes, check. Well, you got two legal moves. What does black do here? See, now I don't feel so bad about thinking. Rook g7 will draw. I'll play queen h5 check. But king h8 wins. Yeah, the knight controls these squares. It's important. Yeah, I didn't want to do this because I had like a second left on my clock. But yeah, here it's winning for black. There's just nothing to do. So knight g4, rook takes h7 doesn't work, but he can just defend. And I still can't win. Right. In fact, I have to do like this. And I didn't have to sacrifice the rook there, but you know, I could. And draw. So knight g4 didn't work, not for the reason I thought, but hey, what are you going to do? So instead I checked. We repeated a lot. And yeah, rook g6. So I could have repeated and drew. That would have won me the tournament. But I'm too high rated, I couldn't do it. You just have to. I mean, my opponent's 500 points lower rated than me. We both have like 6 seconds left. And this is a super complicated position. If you're not going to win that, when are you going to win? Right? I mean, if you're not going to win this type of position. Rook g6 is actually a bad move because he could just take it. And I would have to give perpetual here. You might think, well, why don't you go and win the bishop, right? Because of queen f7. Powerful move. And now white's winning. Yeah, I got nothing going on here. I still would have done this because I never would draw him. But, but he probably didn't see rook takes h6 because, again, we both had just a second left. So he goes threatening nothing. It's threatening check, I guess. Yeah, he actually doesn't have a real threat. But anyways, so I do this again. You notice the strong players, they always repeat. You know, even though I'm not that strong, I'm still strong enough to repeat. And then king g8. Now knight g4 now wins. Well, right. I thought this would be winning for him or drawing for him, but this is check. Yeah. Well, I had 5 seconds left. Come on. What do you want? So yeah, knight g4 does win because I can take back with check there in that variation. But king g8, queen e7, actually not a bad move. Yeah, you know I did this. Yeah, my opponent, he didn't like that I was repeating so much, but it's a good idea to repeat it. It hurts your opponent psychologically. Of course, my opponent wants to draw here. I mean, he was like losing the whole game pretty much. Well, at least, you know, when it started opening up a bit. But yeah, don't draw. Never draw. Yeah, I just picked the first move I could find which didn't lose or draw instantly. So he did take. So I knew my opponent had seen this before, even though it didn't work before, because he did it now. Now if I took his rook, he can't perpetual, but he could just go here. I can't win this. This is impossible to win. I mean, what could I do? I'm going to win with just my queen? Probably not. Am I going to get my rook in there? I don't really see how. If I do, he's going to checkmate me or perpetual check me with his queen and bishop. This position is so drawn, even the computer says it's a draw. And usually computer likes rook more than bishop. But that's the day and age we live in. So again, with just like 1 second left each, pretty much. We had delay, but the 5 seconds goes by faster than you'd want. So this move, I wasn't sure if I was losing now after this, because it looks like I'm getting mated. My opponent, he made a horrible blunder. Again, just the tension of the situation was too much for him to bear. queen e8 check. Yeah. Yeah, and I took this. Finally, my contempt paid off. Yeah, just not agreeing to a draw was what won me this game. I mean, it's really difficult to play with just 1 second left every move for like 10, 15 moves. And then he even did this, and yeah, made it. So I hope you guys learned a lot about the importance of the center, at least more than a basic lesson would be. So try to control that center and make those powerful centralization moves. All right.